So I think we're ready to go. Are you guys ready? Okay, we'll go ahead whenever you are.
Okay. We call this November 11th, 2024 meeting of the AMATS Advisory Committee order. It is 1:02. Apologize for a couple minutes late, but it looks like we do have a lot of people on the phone. So you do the roll call, Aaron?
Yes, I do. Okay, let's go ahead. Taylor Keegan,
Present.
Brian Lindemood,
Present.
Amy
Can you hear
Brown.
me?
Yes, we can hear you, sir.
Present.
Good. And just so you know, Amy Brown has taken over Matt Stitchick's position in terms of filling the role on the TAC. I believe they're still hiring for Matt's position, so just a heads up there. Yemi Alini,
Present.
Steve Rebuffo,
Here.
Luke Boland,
Here.
Ben White, Brad Coy,
Here.
Melinda Kohlhaas,
Here.
and we have Bart Rudolph on the phone.
Here.
Sounds good. And Melissa Babb.
Here.
Sounds good. You have quorum. Everybody is here today. Thank you.
Yeah, everybody is here, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Or here virtually or in person, including a few new people. So welcome, Melissa, who is the new municipal Anchorage planning director, and then Sarah Brown,
Amy Brown.
Amy Brown. Got it. Amy Brown. So welcome. It's great having you both here. If you do have questions as we go throughout this meeting, Aaron is a great one to ask them to. So appreciate having you here. Let's see, and we definitely have the quorum. Also, Aaron, could you do the public involvement announcement?
Of course, AMATS committee meetings are open to the public, and the public is provided an opportunity to comment at each meeting. Business items are first presented by staff or consultants. Then the committees are given an opportunity to discuss the business item. Then the public is formally invited to comment on the items. Each participant will have 3 minutes to speak on their topic. A couple of housekeeping items. If you're joining us virtually and you're not a member of the committee, please turn your camera off when you're not speaking on an item. If you're joining us by phone, to mute and unmute the microphone, press *6. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Aaron. The first part of the agenda now is the approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion for approving the agenda?
Move to approve. Second.
Moved by Mr. Boland, seconded by Mr. White. Are there any changes that are needed to the agenda?
Yes, sir, I do have a change. There's an item on here for 6A, the marathon comments on Fish Creek Trail. I just spoke with Marathon today. They're not able to participate due to logistics issues on the meeting today. So we're asking to reschedule this to December TAC and Policy Committee meeting. In addition, we've asked Marathon to provide a written summary of their comments or concerns they have regarding that project. Once we receive that letter or memo, whatever they send to us, we will provide it to the Technical Advisory Committee and Policy Committee members to review in preparation for the December meeting, where Marathon will come and walk through the memo and explain their concerns and be able to engage directly with the Technical Advisory Committee and Policy Committee. Thank you.
Perfect. Is the recommendation then to reorder B and C to become A and B, or just cross off A and we'll skip to B and C?
I would recommend we just postpone 6A until December meeting, and then we can reorder it to 6A is now the safety campaign update, and 6B is the glossary for AMATS.
Okay, do we have a motion to make that change, or should we just see if everyone's willing to accept it with that change?
Move to amend per staff's comment.
So I guess, do we need to have a motion on the floor before we amend it? Maybe that's what we need to do. Oh, we did.
Just moved. Yeah,
You're
right.
right.
We just need a second.
Okay, perfect.
I think that's. I second.
Okay, moved by Mr. Boland, seconded by Mr. White to postpone 6A and reorder B and C to be A and B. Are there any objections to that amendment? Hearing none, that amendment is approved. Are there any other changes to the agenda? Okay, hearing no other ones, are there any objections to approving the agenda as amended? Okay, hearing no objections, the agenda as amended is approved. Next, we have approval of prior meeting minutes from September 5th, 2024. Do we have a motion?
This is Yemi. Move to approve.
Okay, moved by Mr. Leamy, seconded by Mr. Bullitt. Are there any changes that are needed to the minutes? Anyone, as you're reading through them, see anything that needed adjustment? Okay, hearing no comment. Are there any objections to approving the minutes? Okay, hearing no objections, the September 5th, 2024 minutes are approved. Next, we have item 5B. Action item, the 2050 MTP Amendment number 1.
Yes, this will be me. So strap in for a little bit of a lengthy intro, a little different than what we've done in the past. Malcolm, I'm going to go ahead and take over the screen and share this, just as a heads up. Okay, so we have an MTP amendment that is expected to be happening. And we had a work session yesterday on that, on one of the items for that amendment. And today, this item is before you for further discussion and direction from the Technical Advisory Committee to the Policy Committee on how staff should approach this amendment. Before we get into too many details, I wanted to do just a quick background on why we're here today with this item, what is the purpose behind it, and everything like that. We have some new faces, as well as not everybody is in this 24/7 like staff, so there may be some need to get everybody up on the same page. So first, what is an MTP? It is our long-range transportation plan. We are federally required to do this and to update it every 4 years. We have some echoing. Hold on. Make sure everybody's muted. As much as I like hearing myself speak, I probably don't want to do that. Okay, great. So we're required to do this plan every 4 years, or update it every 4 years. The MTP is required to look out at a minimum of 20 years. And it can be more than that, but no less than that. Our current MTP is 26 years out, so it's 2050. And what we're required to do is take a look at all transportation projects that we expect to accomplish in that 20 or 20 plus year time period. It doesn't really matter funding source, if it's federal funds through the state, federal funds through AMATS, federal funds through somebody else. If it's Title 23 funded, it has to be incorporated or consistent with our MTP. We also look at non-federal sources like the Muni's bond funding. We look at the state's GEO bond funding, and we incorporate as much as we can and as much as we're given information about into our MTP to give us a holistic picture of our transportation system over the next 20 years. It's really the best way for us to plan what we intend to be doing. Then this information feeds into our funding program, the TIP. One of the requirements of the MTP, this is different from the state's long-range plan, which is not required to be fiscally constrained. The AMATS MTP is required to be fiscally constrained. Basically, that means that our revenue, our money that we have, our bank account has X amount in it. And the projects that we want to fund can't go over that amount. You can go under that amount, but you can't go over. So think of it like your checkbook. You have to make sure that it balances at the end and that you don't owe any money, but you can always have extra money left over. How do we come up with the revenue or the money that we have to expend on projects or to program in, not expend it, program into the MTP? Before you on the screen is an example of our capital revenue sources that were used for the current MTP. Basically, we look back at historical data, sometimes 10 years, 20 years, 5 years, depending upon how long the source has been around and how much data that we have available. We look at all that information. We do an estimated average and says, okay, based on the historical, here's how much we can expect on average per year for projects within the MPO boundary. Now, there are ways you can do exceptions to that historical if you can reasonably expect them to be available. So say, for example, historical shows we only spend 50 million on projects within our MPO boundary, but the state is putting forward a new transportation funding program that's going to add another 10 million to our area. And you have state legislators who've been actively working on it. DOT's been working on it. The Assembly's been working on it. You can use that as a reasonable expectation that additional money above and beyond our historical is going to be made available to projects within the MPO boundary. One of our requirements is to ensure we are fiscally constrained, as I said. So we do cost estimates when we develop the MTP. And at that time, we say, okay, here's how much we expect the project to cost, and we have to inflate it out. One of the things we're required to do is kind of keep an eye on those cost estimates. And if those cost estimates change, that could trigger an amendment to the MTP, because we're always wanting to make sure that we are fiscally constrained. Sorry, just a second. Somebody joined and is not muted. Okay. So this is what staff does. Staff monitors these projects to see if there is a change, a significant change in cost estimate. What is significant? It's not spelled out in federal regulations, but our current TIP process is if there is a 50% cost increase of the total project cost, we have to do an amendment. We do the same standards for the MTP. So if there's 50% or more of a project cost change, we do an MTP amendment. So hopefully that helped a little bit of background. Why are we here today? Well, as you all know, the STIP was recently developed and approved. And typically when a new STIP is developed, costs of projects change. They go up or down, some stay the same. And so staff reviewed the STIP amendment, or the STIP, and then the subsequent amendment, and found that there was a change to a project within the AMATS boundary that we had in the 2050 MTP. And that project was the Safer Seward Highway project, or the Seward Highway project 98.5 to 118. When we developed the 2050 MTP, the cost estimate at that time was, I think, $600 to $700 million total. So the portion within the MPO boundary and the portion without combined. We worked with DOT to come up with what the best estimate could be for the portion within our MPO boundary, because that's what we're required to have in our fiscal constraint. And it was estimated about 13% of the project, or $90 million at that time. As you know, the STIP came out and that project cost increased a little. It went from the $600 to $700 million to 1.3 billion or so. Additionally, when you look at the portion within the MPO boundary, it went from 90 million to what we heard yesterday was $266 million. So that's a pretty significant cost increase, especially for the portion that's within our MPO boundary. That's almost a tripling of the project cost. And so we have brought forward to staff a recommendation to do an amendment regarding that project. Because as you remember, our MTP is fiscally constrained, so our revenues and our costs are the same. Now we know that the project costs are more than our revenues because the project cost estimate for this Safer Seward Highway portion within our boundary has increased. So what we have to do as part of the MTP amendment is, okay, how is the revenue going to pay for that? And there are some options for it. We can use the existing revenue we have and move projects around in the MTP and say, okay, we're going to free up however much room we need by moving projects out. Say we move X amount of projects, it frees it up. That covers the project. Another option can be additional revenue, as I said, additional anticipated revenue from outside our historical amounts that is coming to the AMATS area to pay for this project. This is why we had the work session. Staff is not able to make this determination. Staff is AMATS, and the project sponsor is the Department of Transportation. It is up to them to tell us how the cost is going to be covered. And then it's AMATS's job to review the data that's provided by DOT and say, we agree, we disagree, we have questions, etc. So that's why we're before you today. Is we had the work session where we talked about the project, a lot of questions were answered. The project team came and provided, here's the rationale for why this project's moving forward. And then DOT also provided information that at this point, we can reasonably expect additional funding to be made available above and beyond the historical amount within the MPO boundary to pay for this project cost increase. So what staff needs from you as the technical advisory committee and then the policy committee is what to do with the MTP amendment. Do we accept what DOT has provided to us? Say, we're fine with this, add it to the amendment and bring us back that amendment and then go through the public process and everything? Are there changes that you want to make and say, maybe we don't need as much? Maybe the project scope can be toned down or adjusted to help cut the cost down? Or do you even want the project in the MTP anymore because of the cost? There are a variety of options, but those are kind of the big three to think about. So staff is here today to help answer any questions you have regarding this and to get direction from you all on how to move forward to the MTP amendment. So hopefully that helped. I know it was a lot very quickly. So thank you.
Okay, thanks, Aaron. Are there any questions or comments from the committee?
Excuse me.
I guess I would make a.
I was gonna say, the meeting happened yesterday. We are working on an email with the commissioner's office, essentially encapsulating, incorporating all the comments that came in yesterday, but the big one was, will additional funding be available? So we're trying to get that email to the team. We just didn't have it done in advance of today's meeting, but the intent is to try and get that before policy, that there will be something formal from the commissioner's office that says, no, we're committed to ensuring that there's national highway performance programming funding available. The NHPP will be available above and beyond what is typical for the project. So it's coming. We're working on it. I just wasn't fast enough to get it done before the meeting.
Okay, so just to clarify from the work session yesterday, the question of, does this require shifting things out to make room for it, or does this bring new funds?
Right.
And so if the letter is making the commitment from DOT that we are bringing new funds, we are not going to have anything that's already priorities for Anchorage have to get pushed out.
Yep.
Yeah, I think if I can make promises for Ben, since he's writing a letter there. Yeah, it's STIP funded, a STIP funded project. So coming out of another fiscally constrained document, another fiscally constrained program. So not impacting any AMATS funded projects. And
Or AMATS allocation.
or AMATS allocation. And in the STIP that goes out through 27. So we can show the fiscal constraint for that, assuming the memo is going to explain how the additional phases of this project would get funded beyond the life of the STIP here, but it's still within the life of the MTP.
So no AMATS allocation, but what about NHS allocation within Anchorage?
That's the intent. That's what I was told to, right? So,
Okay, because there's the AMATS allocation, there's also the DOT's,
correct.
like, where it's not AMATS allocation. Is that the right term of what we can use?
Yeah, so we were never anticipating AMATS allocation will be used for this project. It has never, ever been the direction from the policy committee, and that's not what we're intending. What we're asking here is DOT, your funding that you bring historically to our area, NHPP, STBG, all the acronyms. Well, what's happening with it? Are you bringing more, or are we just using the select amount that we historically have seen?
And so, to be clear, the letter is saying historically what's been coming is going to come, and this is going to be pulled in from other sources. Okay. Thanks for that information. Are there any other questions or comments from the committee? Go ahead.
Question on what we're being asked today. Is it really just focused on the funding amount and the increase, or is there an opportunity to also ask questions about the scope and the development of the project so far?
You were able to ask those kind of questions if you would like. Yeah, we as staff just really focused on the funding piece because that's the triggering mechanism for what we're doing, either adding a new project, deleting a project, or project cost changes. So you can ask whatever you want.
Well, I appreciated the presentation, and because I didn't know anything about that much about the project yesterday. I think the team answered a lot of my questions, but I've reflected on the project, and I still would like to share some comments that maybe can be put forth as you're collecting more comments. I think a project with this type of magnitude, with 2 lanes in each direction, and shifting the alignment of the railroad is massive. And it's expensive, it's impactful, it's maybe even very tricky to build in segments. Some of the things that I would like to just offer as far as a comment is the desire for additional consideration of less impactful alternatives, especially given the footprint of how it relates to the Chugach State Park boundary. You know, I learned a little bit more, what is the implication of that boundary, and knowing with the federal process, the goal is what can a project do to limit impact to state land or state parkland or parkland. Some of the ideas that were brought forth yesterday was, could we look at different things like speed limit reduction? I heard 55. Could it be 45? Could we look at just isolated areas of either Jersey barriers or some type of delineation at particular curves in the horizontal alignment where there's maybe more problematic areas where you want to protect against passing in the no passing lanes. Now, there's the idea in Europe when you're looking at the Autobahn, and what do you do in a scenario where you need to have an additional lane space for emergency response. So, you know, I did appreciate the idea that you guys did look at some different road sections, including 3 lanes, but maybe it's the focus is the 2 lanes with some wider shoulders, but just the overall idea of maybe not only the focus of this is the alternative, we're collecting feedback on this alternative, but my comment is what could be done to look at a lesser footprint, lesser alternative. So that's what I offer now. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for those comments. We can pass those on to the folks on the team. And we are still working through the NEPA process on this. We still have opportunities for the public to engage and comment on the alternatives that are being analyzed. And so hope people are taking advantage of those opportunities as well.
Appreciate it. I'd like to offer something.
Go ahead.
So I appreciate that this is about budget, but I think that there's also an underlying staffing shortage that goes along with this. And I think that although this project is needed, or parts of this project, there are definitely safety issues on the Seward Highway. I think that the scope as it currently stands will diverse staff resources from focusing on high fatality corridors in Anchorage. I read the 2022 safety corridor audit of this, and on average, the Seward Highway has 2 deaths per year. I think I read that correctly. And just this year alone, we've had 13 pedestrian deaths, not vehicular, but just pedestrian in Anchorage. And so I think the question, even though we're being asked to talk about the budget, I think there are larger implications of staffing, and everyone experiences them, you guys, the municipality. So my concern is by increasing the scope or the size of this project, or increasing the budget will increase the scope, will then take away staff from projects that are extremely important in Anchorage as a partnership between partnerships of DOT and the MOA. And I also just want to say I really appreciate the opportunity to learn from the work session yesterday. I'm in the same boat where I knew of the project, but it was great to be able to talk to the staff and dive into things. So thank you for that opportunity. And then, yeah, I'm also really excited to hear that there's going to be a memo of some sort outlining how the budget is going to be made whole. which also links to staffing shortages. I'm sure if you had full staff, you would have been able to provide that to us today. But yeah, so thank you for putting that together as well. We appreciate it.
Jump on to the end of that. So
Yeah,
to
go ahead.
echo
Yeah.
both Taylor. So I had concerns yesterday, some thoughts yesterday about the work session and to jump on the tail end of Taylor's comment just now. Not only does this project sound like it would drain staff resources, I feel like it might drain maintenance resources and adding vehicle miles to what we already are having trouble maintaining. So I know this budget is probably strictly for construction, but I have questions about what the budget for maintenance operations afterwards. Like, that handle crazy vehicle. And then in addition to that, I heard yesterday that the intent of the project is to move the road more in the direction of a freeway style road where you don't have as many pullouts or turnoffs, and that's part of the safety aspect of this project. With the proximity of the Chugach State Park right there and the potential of limiting access to Chugach, just raises some red flags in my mind, because that is actually, we're hoping to go in the opposite direction and increase access to Chugach State Park. So that was my concern. But I also wanted to second Melinda's comment about the speed limits and alternative designs and smaller footprint.
May I ask, is there a time sensitivity to this recommendation?
We do have a time sensitivity, more or less, just to make sure we get it done. In addition, we have a new tip coming soon, and part of that tip process is a self-certification that says meeting all of our requirements, including that we're fiscally constrained on our documents. So does it need to be done tomorrow? No. However, if DOT wants this item added to the tip to move forward on it, the MTP has to be done first.
Okay. I'd love to see that document before voting. That was the question. But if it has to be done today, we can go with that.
Can delay it to December if you want. It just kind of pushes everything out.
Sorry.
Everything.
Yes. That just means that we will, and the policy committee may also have the same sentiment, that they want to see DOT's comments of how is it going to be funded. So it makes sense. I'm just trying to make sure everybody understands it'll take us 6 months or so for the TIP and MTP amendment to be done. And so that puts us at a, where are we at? We'll be at June, basically, by the time we get everything done. And that'll leave only a couple of months to get it into the STIP for the TIP and to get everything obligated. So we can delay it, but there are possible impacts.
And I think what I'll say to that is, we as a TAC cannot delay it. We can recommend to the policy committee to delay it. We don't have it.
Yep.
We can recommend to the policy committee, hey, we would love to see it next month. Please don't act on it. But as of now, it's going to the policy committee.
Mhm.
And it sounds like the letter probably will be ready
For them.
for them. So this did happen at our last meeting in September, if you look at the minutes, where we
Yeah.
requested an extra month and the policy just made a decision anyway. And that's their right. And so we just need to remember what our role here is to provide our recommendation, and the policy committee will make their determination on where they want to go with it.
And I'd like to kind of second Aaron's concern there on the timing of the TIP amendment. For all the AMATS projects that we have in the TIP, I mean, there's things that are going to need to change there in terms of the program that we're going to have to deliver this fiscal year. And so keeping that on track and having that on the agenda for December seems pretty critical to me at this point.
So my recommendation, instead of voting to postpone it because we don't have it, would be to put some like key considerations that we would want to make sure were part of it. Namely, I mean, it could be some of the comments have been made about considering other designs. My thoughts are along the line of making sure that it's absolutely certain that it's not pulling funding from the other things in Anchorage. So, you know, those are some pieces that as we make any motion, we could suggest to the policy committee, hey, these are our concerns. We didn't get to see the letter yet. Please consider them. So that might be one approach. I do have a question about the implications in the STIP. I seem to recall FHWA had some findings. And I'm trying to remember, what was the finding related to this project?
The finding, and Ben, correct me if I'm wrong, it's kind of been all over the place because there's been a lot. But my understanding is that the portions that are within the MPO boundary can't be in the STIP. They have to be in the TIP. And then the TIP's incorporated into the STIP. So that's how it gets in there. And so they asked them to remove the portions that are within the MPO boundary. The portions that are outside the MPO boundary, I think were allowed to stay in. But I don't know what happened because I'll be honest, and people can be mad at me if this is incorrect. I've been having a hard time finding the approved STIP on the website. And what I have found shows totally different approach to things where they're not showing the future years of funding of things outside of the current fiscal years of the STIP. There's been a lot change and I don't know what's happened. I've sent an email to DOT asking for more information on it. So I don't know what's going on with the STIP.
And the other thing with the finding is because this project does go outside of the boundary and it's a large project, what we typically do is have a parent project, we call it a parent, and then smaller stages are broken up into children. So we have a parent-child relationship with our projects. And so the finding was we could not have a sub-stage of the overall project. And so have the overall project in the STIP and the whole thing's approved, but we still have one phase, one stage of it in the MPA without having that in the MTP and approved. So it's kind of all in, all out kind of thing. And so we have to resolve this, get it into the MTP, and then it will go into the TIP, and then it's incorporated by reference into the STIP. And so that was kind of we've got a chicken and eggs situation here because we have an overarching project, the parent project, but the smaller phases, one phase falls within the MPO boundary, and we're not allowed to just put that into the STIP without having it in a TIP. And so that was the bulk of it.
Sorry, quick clarification on that. It's actually the parent project can't be in the STIP, right? Without it being it has to be in the TIP because it's within the MPA boundary, unfortunately.
So if you look at the findings, it's the parent project number that they've excluded because we have to resolve the portion that's in them.
And I will say it's already in the MTP. This is just updating the cost estimate to make sure we're still fiscally constrained. However, it is not in the TIP. And we would need to update the MTP first to ensure fiscal constraint prior to putting it into the TIP. Now, that's why we would do them succinctly. So, for example, if we were to bring this back with whatever decision is made to the TAC and Policy Committee next year, the first thing on next month, the first thing on the agenda is the MTP. Then the second thing on the agenda is the TIP or the air quality, then the TIP, depending on what we have.
Same meeting, we're just voting on them in the order.
Yep.
And FHWA said we can do that as a way to help speed up the process. So we don't have to get the MTP done first, then start on the TIP, because that would be like a year-long process.
Are there any other questions or comments from the committee?
I guess I'd like to throw out just a couple comments. I hear your concern on resources. One thing that's unique about this project is it's not coming directly out of Central Region. It's actually more of a statewide effort here. So we're looking on consultant resources. We've also got support from our Fairbanks office and other places within the departments of our statewide resources we're helping out. So overall, in terms of the delivery team that's helping out with other projects in Anchorage, it's not a big hit on it. So I think that's one of the positives to how we're approaching this. Also wanted to, we hear your concerns about M&O and additional lanes and what that is going to entail in terms of plowing our roads. And so I think that's always something that we're coordinating as we're moving projects. Our M&O folks are one of our favorite commenters because they're very interested in what we're designing for them. So we hear that concern loud and clear. And then also, we talked a little bit about the stakeholder working group. I think that speaks to some of those access concerns that you have there. I think what we're looking at is problem areas where maybe you have a pull out on a turn. That's not the best place for it, but I know we're coordinating with people in terms of the recreational activities out there, whether it's trailheads or rock climbing or some of the. So that is being discussed as part of this project as well.
Okay, thank you, Luke. Are there any other questions or comments? Maybe is anybody online, any committee members online who have been wanting to speak but haven't yet? Any questions or comments? Okay, so a few other thoughts on my end. Let's say that this gets approved and put in with the assurance that extra funds are going to be brought to this and it's not going to detract from all the things going on in Anchorage. And let's say in a couple of years, we see that this project's moving forward and the things in Anchorage are languishing, just from staffing or whatever else. Like, is there a way to have some sort of like recourse to say, hey, we want to make sure that Anchorage isn't getting left behind, not just from in the STIP or in the TIP, but from an actual projects getting done.
I think the STIP review periods, whether it be a new STIP or the amendment process, is that opportunity. So every time we're going out to amendment for any substantive changes, you got a 30-day review comment. New STIP is what, 45 days spent? Yep. So at that point in time, I think folks should be looking closely at what dollars are coming to Anchorage, coming within the MPO boundary and making those comments based on the needs that we're seeing around the community. So that's the time to make those changes.
And I think, Brad, to be honest, we're in kind of a new era with TIP and STIP relationship. And so it's supposed to be the TIP driving STIP amendments. And so if at some point in the future, things start to change on the project, cost changes, scope changes, that's going to come through the TIP amendment process before it goes into the STIP. So it should be something that's being looked at in here before it's going out for STIP development. And they'll probably be happening simultaneously where the DOT STIP team and our TIP process will be going, ideally, be going hand in hand. But I think if changes happen to the project or other projects in the area, those will be discussed on the TIP and start to drive STIP amendments. So new STIP amendments will be driven largely by what we do here with the TIP.
So if we're seeing that the worst case is coming to pass, what we're trying to avoid, at least what I'm trying to avoid, then there's recourse to say, sorry, we're not, as things are coming forward, we're not going to approve it. It's because we want you to not be focusing all your resources to everyone here. So there would be opportunity.
Yeah, there's going to be conversations.
And one thing that was said yesterday was that this is more of a program than a project. It's 1.3 billion that wouldn't all get constructed at the same time. It would be like in chunks. And so is the TIP amend, that would, as we look at the TIP only being a certain number of years out in the future, only a certain amount of funding, right, is going to be allocated. So even in that way, for future years of funding to be allocated, it needs to come in. So if you can't tell, the thing that I'm most interested in is we have a fantastic working relationship with you guys and are doing some amazing things with the Vision Zero program and a lot of things that we're trying to do that Anchorage has a lot of needs. And so I would just be extremely frustrated if this was happening and those other things were not, just because Anchorage has, the majority of the fatalities in the state. We have huge needs here. We have our public are getting tons of comments about the maintenance of our different roads. There's just so much going on that I feel like we have plans and things in place and projects, and they just need to, I guess, any way to be able to tell commissioner and governor and others, hey, if you want this project, Anchorage residents want to be taken care of inside of Anchorage before doing all these things outside on the periphery, you know, so. And to speak to my comments, my thoughts about this specific alternative, having been through many planning processes, I see where the concept is with 4-lane, and I understand why you've got there. I recognize that there have been a lot of iterations and committees and others. And so while I would hope that there could be a cheaper way to do it, really my focus is less on, is this the right cross-section alternative, and more, is this going to detract? So if I have more of the assurance that no, it's not going to detract, I'm going to be a little bit more willing to say, sure hope this doesn't like ruin the beauty of this amazing corridor that we have. Trust the project team and their process, because I know that you've had a significant process. So, and if you do, as you're implementing things or learning, hey, yeah, this is going to actually change things in a way that we didn't want, being able to pivot in my mind is important. That's where I'm coming from. So, do we have any other questions or comments from the committee?
I'd like to make a comment really quickly. I know I'm not a committee member, but I understand DOT's perspective on this about it won't detract from funding within the AMATS area. I just don't believe that. This is not the only mega project that is underway right now that Department of Transportation has within the state of Alaska. There's the Cooper Landing Bypass project. It's $800 million plus. That's not even in the state, really. So where's that funding going to come from? There's the West Susitna Access project. Where's that funding going to come from? There's the Kinnick Crossing is starting up again. Where's that going to come from? What about Ingra Gamble with the Seward to Glen PEL? Where's that funding going to come from? What about the interchanges out in Eagle River that people want done? Where's that funding going to come from? Like, I just want people to understand that $1 billion plus project, and it's not going to be just $1 billion by the time it's all said and done, is massive for our community. And when you look at the desire of this project is to help with safety in the area, it's a weird thing to say in an area that's not the highest safety need. This project's not in the AMATS safety plan. It's not in the strategic highway safety plan that the state does. It doesn't even rank on the HSIP list very much. So from my perspective as staff that looks at this and all other things and works with the other MPOs and communities in this state, it's a concern. And I just want to express that concern. And I know the governor and the commissioner will do what they want, and that's their right to do. But it's a hard sell in my mind with the problems we've been having with the STIP to say that a project like this will not impact funding within Anchorage. I mean, projects are already impacted with Anchorage, and they haven't even really started on this project. So AMATS projects are being delayed left and right. We are not the highest priority for the Department of Transportation at this point. They say they want to shift that priority, but we're having delays left and right on things for various reasons, of course. One of them is staff. And I just felt the need to say something. And I know you all are in a tough position of what you can and can't say. So I'm sure I'll get talked to after this meeting of how terrible of a person I am for not wanting to be concerned with safety. But I am concerned about safety. People are dying left and right in our community, and the solution is the Safer Seward Highway project. Come on. I'll stop. Thank you.
The planning director and the technical advisory committee, I'd like to adopt what my staff just said. It's my comment.
Go ahead. Did you have something to say?
Yeah, I do. You know, the presentation was very informative yesterday. I was excited to see it. And that heat map that they showed along the corridor really conveyed that there's not just an isolated area of incidents and concern. It's really systemic throughout that whole corridor. So if we are programming the 1.3 billion for the entire corridor, but yet we can only do it phases at a time, it's going to take a long time to make this improvement within maybe a 20-year time frame. Whereas safety issues are inherent already. So is there a way to look at that smaller footprint to make a faster improvement with a lesser cost? And, you know, even change culture of driving. And I want to kind of clarify my statement, if even bringing in this idea of the Autobahn. It's not my intent to compare this road corridor as the goal of making a high-speed corridor. I'm only offering that perspective just to say there's built-in contingency of how to get emergency vehicles in there. And it could be a wide shoulder, it could be something. But explain, I just wanted to make sure that was known, that I think the idea of having this corridor that has some blind corners, it has horizontal curvature challenges and getting compliance in the no passing zones with frustrated drivers. You know, I think it's important to address the entire corridor sooner, and maybe by doing a smaller footprint, you could get there sooner. So that's one reason. It's not so much just about the money, but how are we going to accomplish just, okay, this part's safe. That's safe. We did that in 2 years. Now the next 2 years, we're going to do this one, but over 20 years, you know, are we really accomplishing the 100% of the corridor, or are we just doing 20% within a 5 year? So that's one other idea I have. It's not just about the money. Yes, it is about the money. It's very expensive, but it's the overall impact, changing parkland, view sheds, and the railroad. I would like to hear a little bit more about the interaction as the stakeholder working group. What did the railroad reflect on this impact? I think that was one of my last questions I didn't have time to ask yesterday.
I think all those are very real challenges that we're working in this corridor. And one of the reasons why it's one of the remaining safety corridors that we don't have really a great answer for, right? Because it is so expensive, it is so challenging. And we have done HSIP projects within this area. We have done improvements within the area between Fire Marsh and Girdwood. We're seeing those crash trends still heading in the wrong direction. So hear your concerns loud and clear.
Okay. Thank you for letting me have the floor for longer. Thanks, guys.
Okay, any other questions or comments from the committee? I think it's time to move to comments from the public. So this is the 3 minutes does apply here, but any members of the public who would like to comment are welcome to. First, if anyone online wants to raise your hand, great. I'll look and see though, is anyone in the room interested in commenting? Okay, I don't see anyone in the room, so we can go online to those who are online. I see Alexa. Alexa, you have 3 minutes to give your comments. Once you come off mute, we can hear you speaking.
Thanks, Brad. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. My name's Alexa Dobson. I'm the Executive Director of Bike Anchorage. Thanks for the opportunity to comment. We've been a stakeholder on the project, and we really appreciate that the plan includes a pathway to make better connectivity for bicycling along the Seward Highway. We've advocated throughout this process for the most efficient redesign of the Seward Highway in this area, with the idea that we don't need to spend an enormous amount of money and massively widen the highway and increase vehicle speeds to achieve safety goals. And the meeting we're having today addressing increased project costs should really make us stop and think about the cost benefit analysis here. And that's where I want to focus my comments today. In the work session yesterday, we heard that there was a possibility that DOT would be looking into bringing in more federal funding, and that other areas of town that have DOT managed arterials might also qualify or might also be good uses of that funding because they're part of the national highway system. And our position is that if we do rustle up a new bucket of money, that's fantastic, but it should not be used to widen the highway. It should go to addressing the immediate safety issues on those city roads in Anchorage. The awful rash of pedestrian deaths this fall is still fresh in all of our minds, and more folks lost their lives in car crashes too. So those DOT managed arterials where those deaths occurred are exactly the kind of streets where we need safety improvements. And if we can use, if there's other funding out there that we can use, that's really where we should be focusing it. They have some of the highest risks for people walking, biking, and taking transit, and the need there is far greater than just to make an existing highway wider. As recently as just yesterday, DOT has told us that they consider pedestrian safety a priority, and we think that's fantastic. And this is an opportunity for DOT to put those priorities into action. So that's what we hope to see. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Are there any other members of the public online? I don't see anybody in person that have raised, but anybody online that would like to make a comment?
Hello, this is Nancy Pease. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Nancy. We'll give you the floor now, and now 3 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. Just very briefly, I share the skepticism that Aaron voiced that we can't afford everything on the DOTPF mega projects list. And I think he perfectly stated it, that the governor and commissioner set political priorities, and that it's important to represent the practical and fiscal side and the public priorities. And I hope that the Technical Advisory Commission will take up that, that responsibility. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nancy, for your comments. Are there any other members of the public online who would like to comment? Okay, going once, twice. Okay, looks like we've given an opportunity for everyone to comment. So now we're back on to what the will of the committee is on this item. Do we have any motions?
I'd like to motion to adjust the project scope and funding amounts to fit within the constraints of the MTP fiscal analysis. And I want to say that's not a reflection of the DOT staff here in this room, but a lot on the general conversation surrounding this. And it's a good project. We just maybe can achieve what we need to with the funding that has already been allocated. And I would encourage the project team to do so.
So to restate that in what we're doing now with our recommendation. So your motion is to make a recommendation to the policy committee.
Yes.
That the project gets to be adjusted, but for scope to fit, to stay within the prior dollar amount that's in the MTP. Adjust the project scope funding amount to fit within the constraints. Okay. It's in the memo. Adjust the project scope and funding amounts to fit within the constraints of the MTP fiscal analysis. I recommend the policy committee to, yeah. So, and then the policy committee has that choice, and what they would be doing is requesting DOT to make that change.
Yeah, what does this mean and how is this done? Basically, we would say change whatever the scope is currently to whatever you want it to be, and say you can't go above the cost estimate in the MTP. Well, that's just the portion within the MPO boundaries. So, I don't really know what that means in the long run or what that really looks like. It's an option, but this is new for me. We've never really done this before in the past in this kind of like complex process.
Okay. So does that make sense on the motion? Don't have questions on that? Okay, so we have a motion. Do we have a second? Okay. So Any discussion, I guess, on this motion?
I guess one of the challenges is not knowing the details that the project team is probably better aware of, is if you're gonna break, when we have a project phased in the STIP, we've gone through that. Usually there's engineering background, there's termini that makes sense, there's some efficiencies associated with that. And so by changing that allocation to what's currently MTP, probably pushes things out and may make things harder or less efficient for us to advance a project through construction. That'd be one of my concerns.
Other comments from the committee? Other discussion?
Yes.
Go ahead, Melinda.
You know, I'm not that comfortable with the idea that we're only commenting on what's in the inside boundary of the AMATS boundary, because it's the entire corridor that needs to be considered in the overall cost. And take a look at the footprint of the overall corridor, not just this area. So if we make a motion on just the 90 million versus the 266, what's our ability to express to the policy committee that we have some concerns about where the NEPA process is heading, and that we want a global look to be considered, and then more public input from all users, not just the people who are just driving it, but from different stakeholders of what is shaping our future that with this massive project for Alaska and Anchorage.
I guess as we're talking about a project here, that's going to be a program of projects, right? That's going to be something that's going to be phased years in the future, because it can't be a dedicated project. It would have too big an impact on DOT funding. This isn't the last we're going to hear about this, right? And we're going to talk about it here in this week. We're going to talk about it next month in the TIP amendment. We're going to talk about it in the future TIP amendment. It's going to be in STIP amendments. This is going to be a discussion point for a long time. And so as we're talking about the MTP funding that we have right now and the fiscal constraint with the MTP, we have a fiscally constrained document in STIP which shows money that's dedicated to this project right now. All that can change. All these documents get amended on a regular basis. So I guess I would just offer up that this isn't our one bite at the apple by any means.
So perhaps overall, to answer my question, if we're only weighing in on the portion that's in the AMATS boundary.
Sorry, I have a
Okay.
comment for you. So we are actually not required to just show the portion within the AMATS boundary. The policy committee can include the entire project in both the MTP. We have to talk about the entire project in the MTP, but the funding is only the portion within the MPO boundary. We actually have the option as the MPO to include the entire project because it's a regionally significant project and include everything within our funding constraints and all that kind of stuff. The reason it wasn't originally is because there was not enough funding available to fund it based on historical funding. So the committees can elect to say, we're going to move the entire project into the MTP, and how is it going to be funded? But there's not enough funding in the MTP in 2050 to do that. It means most every other DOT project would be moved out plus some.
Unless it was accepted that the additional funding be
That would be,
committed to it.
that would have to be part of the discussion to be like, okay, we're going to actually just go ahead and take all the additional funding and say that's fine. And then we're going to give you another revenue source, or we're going to give you this assurance that this particular revenue source we're going to use, NHPP, the National Highway Performance Program for NHS funding. Sorry, it's just a tech term for it, is going to increase to cover the entire cost of the project. And so you guys as AMATS, your projects will be made whole, will be kept whole. We could also do the same for the TIP. The TIP could show the entire project, including all of the cost, not just the portion within the MPO boundary. We are allowed to do that.
Okay, so with the motion that's on the table right now, any more discussion on that? Do you want to, I know that we typically just have we can only have one positive motion that gets accepted. So if this is in a negative, we can then have another motion, right?
Yeah, this one isn't really negative per se. Negative would be like, well,
I
yeah,
mean, I guess if this one doesn't pass,
yes,
then we could
do another
do
motion.
another motion. But if this one does pass, then
That's it.
this is closed.
Yep.
Okay, so motion that's on the table then is to make the recommendation of the policy committee to request DOT adjust the project scope and funding amounts to fit within the constraints of the MTP fiscal analysis.
But a quick question.
Okay, go ahead, Ben.
Aaron, what is the current amount in the MTP for this?
Oh, geez. Okay, so the current amount for this project in terms of just what we show in the fiscal constraint, 90 million. So if you were to adjust it to the current, you'd basically just say you can't spend more than what we show in the MTP within just the portion within the AMATS boundary, which is just 113 to 118.
So
Is that what we looked at on the entire map, or that's just a piece of it?
That's
That's just a piece within ours. The whole project goes 98.5 to 118.
So the portion that's in the boundary currently that we have in the MTP is 90 million, but what we heard yesterday from the project team was that's now 266 million.
Correct.
So if we say we're capped at 90, there's additional project scope that's going to be cut out or dropped or not continued to go forward. They're going to have to find some way to make this work, which typically in our world means the scope reduction or portions of projects are dropped out.
Yeah, that's kind of the hard part we have right now because we're not showing the whole project within our MPO boundary and it's really just this little piece. But from FHWA's world, and you know, if I'm misspeaking, somebody let me know, they look at the project as a whole. They don't just sit there and be like, well, we're only looking at the one in the MPO boundary. They look at everything. They just say within the MPO boundary, these are the requirements you have. So I guess if the entire project were in the MTP, you could say the whole project scope needs to be reduced and you need to cut the funding, something like that. I don't know what that looks like. That's a new one on me.
But it's backwards to the normal process, right? I mean, you engineer the solution that you think is going to do the good that you're going for, right? In this case, we're trying to address head-on collision, serious injury and fatality crashes. And you're trying to phase it in a logical term. When you hamstring the engineering with a dollar amount, it doesn't go up. It doesn't work that way. I guess one of the challenges that I hear is I understand what we're saying here, that we want to be as responsible with the money as we can. But I hear one of the biggest complaints is that we're worried that this is taken away from the needs in Anchorage. And so to put a burden on the designers and the efficient delivery of a project on the Seward Highway because we don't see the money come into the community, I have a hard time with that, I guess. I think there's all these needs and we need to address each of these needs appropriately.
Yeah, and can I respond? Yes. I agree with you. I've managed projects and I understand what you're saying, but I also think that constraining the funding, I don't think we need 4 lanes. And I think when you're talking about scope reduction, that could be a positive outcome. I know we're talking about 5 miles or whatever, but I'm hoping that this exercise would then reflect on the broader corridor. And we can have 4 lanes where it's necessary. But part of this is my concerns about staffing, and then part of this are my concerns about design, but that's not what we're supposed to be talking about today. This isn't a work session, so that is mirrored in this, and I'll say that is also a reflection of why I made this motion. And I understand that constraining the engineering does the project no favors, but it is not what we're tasked with. It's like it's not disconnected from the outcome. This motion is not disconnected from that outcome. Does that make sense?
It does.
It is.
Yeah. I will point out something, and again, I can do this freely. This was originally supposed to be a PEL project that was supposed to go through and kind of address all of these concerns that people are having with this. And it suddenly got shifted from a PEL to a design, basically an environmental document and design, with no real coordination from DOT. It got stuffed into the STIP, and then we had to last minute scramble to get it into the MTP and the TIC. So I understand, I hear from you, Luke, that, you know, what we're talking about here is a little backwards. Yeah, the whole process so far to date has been a little iffy. So I think we all may need some flexibility as we move forward to get to something on this corridor.
And I agree with that, Aaron. I think there was the Pell that was in process. We had a feasibility study that we've done. We've done multiple projects within this corridor. I go back and forth of whether a Pell would be beneficial in this. I think when we talk about the Pell that's going on Seward to Glen, that effort has so many different alternatives. There's so many different ways you can go with that study area. This corridor, we kind of know what we're dealing with, right? Are you going to the mountain? Or are you going to the ocean? You got the railroad. You don't have the same number of options. So I don't know. I can get there with the idea that the Pell wasn't going to be as beneficial, and I like to get to the point where we're actually building something and putting improvements out there that people are using. I get frustrated sometimes when we do too much planning. We don't move towards something that's tangible. So I don't know. I think Pells are great tools as appropriate, but I guess in this situation, I could get behind the way that.
And I'll say it, you guys have been improving that highway. I mean, since I moved here in 2007, you guys have been doing work on that highway that's been very successful. So please don't shortchange yourself that you guys haven't been doing it, or, you know, haven't been building, you've been doing too much planning. Yeah, you actually haven't really been doing any planning on that corridor. You've been building. So I think that's good.
Well, thank you for that. I do feel like we've made some good changes along there. I just wish the crash data would reflect that, right? I wish it was going in the right direction there. So.
Okay, so are we ready to make a vote on this motion? Is there any more discussion or amendments or anything, or are we gonna vote on this one?
A real quick note, Steve Rebuffo did step away. He said he'll be back for a few minutes. So just a heads up there, you are needing his vote to anything.
Okay. And
Is there another way to offer another idea before we vote?
sure,
I mean, maybe it's not so much about the 90 versus the 266 for this section, especially if they're bringing in the extra money from the NHPP and NHSPP. I think some of my comfort level would be knowing that there's more planning effort to happen and more public involvement in the EA. It's not done yet. And I'm not so sure capping the money just on this short segment is going to do that much, knowing that it's this long corridor. I would be willing to say, keep the money in. They have to prove that they have, you know, fiscal responsibility of where that money's coming from. It's not impacting the AMATS allocation, but really just emphasizing the message of please include the public. Let's make sure you're doing full, thorough public involvement from various entities, not just the people who are using it and then hang up and okay, thank you, because you don't use it. I don't want to hear from you. But yeah, I know you had very many, you know, thorough, different stakeholder working group participation. But I still think there's the Pell, what the Pell does is make sure that you've looked at a footprint and how can you deliver something maybe even quicker with a smaller footprint. So I'm not sure if you guys would be willing to reconsider whether it is if we cap the money and that sends a message and that constrains them from what they could do versus saying, okay, you can have the money, but please know that we want you to think about this entire corridor, how it impacts capacity, funding, whether it is drawing resources from, you know, our community, and how could you deliver the project faster if it was a smaller footprint? So I don't know if that would be something from the committee, if they'd be willing to consider keeping the money in there, I mean, amending, making the amendment, but sending a message that we want the policy committee to understand that the EA is not completed and we still want more alternatives explored with the public.
So what I see is that's another different motion.
Yeah, that's a different motion.
I don't see how to amend theirs with that because this one that's before us specifically is like limiting to the funding, whereas what you're offering is different. So do you want to withdraw your motion or should we vote on your motion?
Let's vote.
Okay, let's vote on the motion.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure. So,
If you guys don't like it, don't vote for it. Yeah. Keep it moving, but yeah.
okay, so let's do, it's probably gonna be a roll call vote. So do you mind leading us through that?
Or just 1 second. Notes on. Vote. Okay, Taylor Keegan,
Yes.
I have to ask. Okay.
Yeah.
Brian Lindemood,
Yes.
Amy Brown,
Yes.
okay, Yemi Alimi,
I'm gonna abstain.
abstained, okay. Steve Rebuffo, absent, okay. Luke Boland,
No.
Ben White,
No.
Brad Coy,
I go now.
okay. Melinda
No,
Kohlhaas, sorry. Okay, Bart Rudolph,
No.
okay, and Melissa Bab.
No.
Okay, it fails. It is 3 yeses and 6 nos, 1 abstain and 1 absent.
Okay, so we'll entertain another motion. You want to make your motion, Linda?
okay. I motion to recommend to the policy committee that we move forward with the amendment to increase the project amount with the understanding that it is not impacting our AMATS allocation, funding allocation. But we express for the project team to continue considering alternatives, including a lesser footprint of the project corridor with the goal of getting the safety improvements and the non-motorized facility construction in place and delivered sooner.
I offer 2 friendly amendments before it's seconded. One, with assurances that Anchorage's projects will be prioritized.
Hold on a second. Okay, so then you're gonna do a friendly amendment. Can we do a second before you do your friendly amendment? If there is a second for Melinda's motion.
Second.
Okay, thank you.
So moved by Melinda, seconded by Elisa. And my suggestion on the friendly amendment is have that say assurances that Anchorage's projects will be prioritized. And not will be prioritized at the same level or more above this one. This one won't move. Yeah, that makes sense. And then the second one being that the project team identify safety only focused alternative, like you're saying, but specifically ask for a new safety focused alternative.
Can I just say second with discussion? And then we can do.
We already have a second.
Oh, we do have a second. Okay.
Yeah, these are friendly.
Okay.
It's a request for a friendly amendment, but it's, if it's, you know.
The mover and the second have to agree.
Do I have to agree to?
You don't have to agree. You can disagree if you want.
Um,
I'm just offering some.
respectfully, I disagree.
Okay,
I think just keeping it simple and let the EA work its course and knowing that there's expressed interest of what I've shared. I'm not sure, because I believe Luke has explained that these things are working with independent project teams. I don't see that it's necessarily drawing from local teams that are working on our regional. That's my understanding.
Correct. Yeah, there's involvement from the region, but
No.
it's more of a team approach. For multiple regions statewide and consultants support. So.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's just my thought.
Can I ensure that what was captured in your motion is that we're reducing the project footprint without compromising this non-motorized component within the corridor? Yeah, so that is not part of reducing the footprint, is compromising a non-motorized component.
When looking at,
I think that
That's primary.
we know that this corridor is addressing
Yes.
safety, goods and services, but also there's incredible recreation, active transportation, and also touristic value to a non-motorized corridor being connected all the way to Girdwood. So,
is that a friendly amendment?
Yes,
yes.
I agree with that.
Well, we have to do,
Oh.
friendly amendment is from Taylor. Is there a second for the friendly amendment? Thank you. And then, second. So this is gonna kill me.
doesn't an amendment need a motion and a second, but a friendly amendment is just her asking if the mover and the second agree with that friendly amendment?
We're gonna do it this way in case I mess up and Lori can be like, you are covered in our basis, because I don't want to have it be like, you didn't get the second you were supposed to. I'm not crossing Lori. So then now we ask if the mover and the second are okay with the friendly amendment. Mover's okay?
I concur.
Okay, second?
Yes.
Thank you.
Maybe if we have Aaron repeat what we've got so far. How's that sound?
Okay, so here's what I have. So the original motion was an amendment to increase the project amount with the understanding that the AMATS funding allocation is not impacted. Sorry, impacted. And the project team will look at lesser footprints for safety improvements and non-motorized improvement. Oh, so we'll look at a lesser footprint and ensure that safety improvements and non-motorized improvements are moved forward quicker.
Does that include mine?
Yeah, that was the main, sorry. And then this friendly amendment, I'm trying to keep track of when looking at reducing the footprint, don't compromise the non-motorized improvements.
Safer Seward Highway.
Whoever just joined, you are not muted. I recommend you mute, please. You. Okay, did that capture your guys's request?
I think the only thing that I want to make sure is that the statement addresses the entire corridor that the NEPA is studying, which it should, because the NEPA is studying the entire corridor. So not encapsulating just the portion in the AMATS boundary, entire project.
Are you requesting that the full corridor be folded into the MTP with the additional funding, like Aaron mentioned?
No, but what we've expressed, the footprint, the lesser footprint
Okay,
for the entire project.
so this reduction should be looked at through the entire corridor.
Not just the AMATS boundary.
The second concur with that.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, now, did you have a question or?
I did. I was just wondering intent on the motion and just some clarity on the language about AMATS allocation. Does that apply to any DOT projects that we have in Anchorage, or just
No.
the money that goes to AMATS to fund the program?
Just the money that goes to AMATS to fund AMATS projects.
Okay, so in that case, I'm wondering.
That's not the right wording.
Yeah, maybe just wondering if you might consider an amendment
Sure.
to include project funding instead of just the AMATS allocation.
Aaron,
Do you want to say all project funding?
Yeah.
Within the AMATS area?
All DOT project funding.
yes, yeah. Yeah,
Right,
you're right,
say
because
all
it's like
DOT.
the umbrella is capturing everything,
Not just the.
but not just the AMATS funded
program.
projects.
So all
Correct.
DOT and PF funding within the
That's
AMATS area.
appropriate.
Yeah.
I concur.
And from the letter that you were saying that's been written, is there anything here that from the amendment or amendment that you could make to this statement that like reflects what you're working on?
I think that's the intent. That's what I'm drafting, is that this project, the funding for this project is not going to be coming directly from, we're not sacrificing Anchorage, DOT, NHS projects to pay for this. Those are getting funded. This is coming from other NHPP sources.
So, can we have that be a friendly amendment so that we capture those terms in this statement?
Okay, another friendly amendment.
Are you good with that, Melinda? And maybe some?
I think it's pretty
Can you
clear.
restate what you said, Ben?
I'm trying to think of the quickest, easiest way to say this thing, but available federal funding for this project is not at the detriment of other DOT Anchorage projects.
So it encompasses everything, the NHS.
Yep.
What was it, MP,
The NHPP.
HPP?
Available federal funding to the project is not at the detriment of DOT and PF Anchorage projects.
Like it. Right.
Okay.
Brian has.
Oh, Brian has his hand up. Okay, go ahead, Brian.
I've got a couple concerns. Because I'm getting really confused. I was really confused about what we were voting on last time, but two things. I've got concerns three concerns. The more I think about it, I just keep getting more. DOT's gone through a heck of a process to get to where they are, of which, I've been involved with it somewhat. Some of the other folks in this room have been involved with it more than I have. But I'm a little concerned that we are arbitrarily asking them to do things, constrain things, reduce things, add things, don't take out these things, but do these other things, when I don't think all of us have had full exposure to all the stuff that DOT's done and the full understanding of the record of what they've gone through. My second concern has to do with us basically, some of the parts of this amendment are saying you're going to do all these things outside the AMATS boundary, not just to get the stuff inside the AMATS boundary approved with this. And I think I'm concerned that we're overreaching our authority by holding this one piece of this project up, by telling DOT to do something outside the AMATS boundary with the extension of that same project. And third, all this friendly amendment business, I don't think we're following the rules. I mean, I'm not a Robert's Rules lawyer or anything like that, but I'm having a very tough time. There's parts that are being added that I can concur with, and there's parts being added that I don't. And it's just three people in the room saying, oh, we could add this. Oh, no. Yeah, fine, whatever. But, so I can't support any of this because of the stuff that's getting added after the fact. So we got to clean this up somehow.
Thanks for your comments, Brian. Yes, trying to legislate on the fly without.
It is hard. I will say that DOT has already done a lot of work to review smaller footprints on this project, and they've dismissed them as not meeting the needs of the project. That's why the 4-lane was selected, because I believe they did look at a 3-lane, they looked at a 2-lane, keeping it as is and stuff like that, and it didn't meet the intent of the project. So you're kind of asking them to do what they've already done to this date.
And I guess while I'll speak for friendly amendments, it was more trying to clarify and wordsmith than it was changing the intent of what the initial motion was. But it is complex, and so I hear you on that too, Brian.
Can I ask you to read the amendment as it stands?
Of the motion?
Yes.
Sorry.
So amend to increase the project amount with the understanding that all DOT NPF funding within the AMATS area is not impacted, and the project team will look at lesser footprints while not compromising the non-motorized improvements, and ensure safety and non-motorized improvements are moved forward quicker. That's what all the little friendly amendments added in.
We can express it and they can say, we already looked at it. But at least it's been expressed.
Is that clear, Brian, on your end, what that motion has?
I think I'm clear about where you guys are with the amendment. I'm not entirely sure.
That
why-
was, okay.
I'm not entirely sure why we're giving DOT that specific direction at this time. I can understand saying, look, okay, we will make the adjustment to the MTP and the tip and all the other stuff under the premise that you're not going to mess up all the other projects inside the AMATS boundary. That makes sense. But then giving a technical guidance over and above that, I think, you know, we're trying to order from 2 different restaurants here.
I think
The
that
technical advisory.
I think that the piece that's different is, could they make incremental changes sooner in the delivery so that the whole corridor can have better function for safety and non-motorized facilities?
But you're telling them they can make those changes only in one direction. What happens if something comes up and they have to make the footprint larger? You haven't given them that option.
So one thing you could do, Brian, is request an amendment to cut out that second half that's focused on looking at the safety. And then we can vote on that and see where it lands. And
Well, we can do a friendly, well, we've gotten this far with a friendly amendment, so we just make it a friendly amendment going the other way.
or you can make it as a friendly if that's helping. I mean, the friendlies were trying to wordsmith more than like revise it to something that it wasn't.
Understood. All right, let's just do it formally. I'd like to amend it to basically say, and you can wordsmith it however you want. Add it, but you're not changing anything. You're not going to do it at the detriment of the program that's already identified within the AMATS boundary. Period.
Okay, so
And however you need to wordsmith that to make that happen, but all the discussion regarding make the footprint smaller, don't take the non-motorized out, do it for the whole corridor, those are technical design comments that have context to the project overall, but don't necessarily have the funding piece as part of this.
okay, so that I can restate your amendment to the motion, it would be to remove the language regarding the things you mentioned, the lower cost alternative, and yeah, all that second half.
So basically would just read amendment to increase the project amount with the understanding that that all DOT and PF funding within the AMATS area is not impacted.
So do we have a second on that?
Yes, this is Yemi. I'm gonna second that.
Okay, so do we have any additional discussion on that amendment?
I still don't believe it encapsulates some of the ideas that we would like the EA to still consider. Are there ways to minimize the overall cost and the footprint with the understanding that the goals could be met sooner without having phased, the phases take so long over a 20-year, especially knowing that
Okay, wait,
okay.
Ben, did you have
I
something?
was going to try and address some of the concerns. I'm going to rely on previous life, what I used to do for environmental for the department. I think our EA, our section 4F analysis, I think our permitting eventually will drive a lot of these conversations because we are going to be held, we won't be able to move any projects forward until the NEPA document's approved. And so there won't be any projects, no matter how fast we want them to go and put something out there today, we can't until the NEPA document's done. And so that NEPA process is going to drive an awful lot of our alternative analysis. And I think right now they're proposing a preferred alternative of what they're thinking based on today's planning efforts. But this is going to get morphed and changed over the course of the next few months. And so when the draft EA comes out, it probably will have a lot different alternative discussions than what we saw yesterday. And I anticipate that Section 4F, all of our federal and state permitting requirements that are going to take place over the next 6 months to a year is going to shape this significantly. And so I think there is going to be a huge reduction, changes and morphs. I think there's going to be locations where they say you've got room, go ahead and blow it out 4 lanes here. There's going to be other areas where we're going to have agencies going, oh, you're not touching the park, you're not going to put in wetlands, you're not touching belugas, you're not. And so it's going to get necked down to the maximum extent practical, I think. And so I think NEPA is going to change the alternatives and force us changing it. So I think I would suggest we let the NEPA process play out and see what comes out in the draft, which we're probably going to have the project team come back at some point and talk about it, but I don't know.
I have a question. Who approves the NEPA document?
The NEPA document will be approved by the state.
Okay, so the state who's doing the project develops their own NEPA document and then approves that document that they developed themselves.
Yep.
Sounds
Okay.
clear.
Okay, so are we ready to vote on the amendment?
As draft as the new.
With the, you'd
This is
have
the
to
amendment.
vote on the amendment
This
to
is the
the
amendment
motion.
Oh, gotcha.
that Brian
Yeah.
Okay, got
put
it.
forward. So we're voting on whether to remove all of the other language. So that it's, yeah. Is that clear? Any questions on that?
I just have one more comment, just that I understand Brian's concerns, and I'll just say I do understand his concerns, but I also believe that it is early enough in the process that we can at least voice a desire to see those things considered. And it addresses the scope of the project, which is directly related to the budget. So I think they are relevant to the budget discussion.
And I was just going to throw out there too, kind of similarly, I understand where Brian's trying to go on this. But Aaron, in the past, I've seen you do really good summaries of, hey, this was the discussion that occurred at TAC and kind of capture a lot of the things that we hit on today, concerns raised by members. And set up the discussion there in policy. I don't know if that's an option in this situation as well.
So you're suggesting that we remove that language and maybe put it into a summary? Is that your suggestion?
Well, I don't know if it has to be into the changed into the amendment that Brian's got proposed right now, or if that's something that can be conveyed by staff to policy.
I'll comment on that since I give the summary. But the policy committee really looks at you all to make the recommendation, not have staff come and regurgitate what you say at these meetings. It's become more noticeable that the policy committee members are wondering why I'm having to say all this and it's not in your guys' motion. So I would recommend that if you're looking at specific changes to a project, you include it in your motion so the policy committee knows where you go. Because I can take notes, but it's not me that's making the recommendation, it's you guys that's making the recommendation.
Okay, we're ready to vote or?
I have one question.
Okay, go ahead.
And, so what you're describing is basically what we're trying to propose or what Melinda's proposing. There seems to be a disconnect in the project team communicating that yesterday during the work session. Can you explain why that might be?
I think because they're at the point now where they're starting to work on the negotiations based on what's come out of the work groups. And so they're crafting the draft environmental document right now. So they're kind of focused on a preferred alternative and other alternatives. But in order for them to get to final EA, they still have rounds of public review, public comment, and they've got other aspects of it. And so depending on the alternative, if they have to take park space, there's going to be 4F analysis that has to go out for its own individual its own public comment period. So I think that's what they're looking at right now, is trying to wiggle through without having to do too much impact to wetlands and other resources out there. And I think they feel like they've got an alternative that works right now. And that's what they're drafting their EA on. But that draft EA will go out for public. And there'll be more opportunity for folks to weigh in.
So it's probably fair to say that it's not that they just didn't tell us this.
Yeah,
It's not that it wasn't it wasn't purposefully skirted over.
I think they had limited time here to present everything.
I don't think anybody asked that question.
Right.
So, but let's do the vote on the amendments.
Yeah.
And Aaron, if you do the roll call on that.
Okay, Taylor Keegan?
On the amendment, correct?
Yes, this is just on the amendment to remove the additional comments about looking at the lesser footprint of the non-motorized. Okay, Brian Lindemood,
Yes.
Brown,
Can I abstain while I learn more about this project?
of course,
Thank you.
of course. Yemi Alimi,
Yes.
okay, Steve Rebuffo,
Yes.
okay, Luke Boland,
Yes.
Ben White,
Yes.
Brad Coy,
No.
hey, Melinda,
No.
hey, Bart Rudolph,
No.
and Melitha.
No,
Okay, just a second, let me tally. 2, 4, 5, 2, 4, 5. So the motion does not pass. It's a tie vote. Typically, a tie vote happens. You need an affirmative number of people. There are not affirmative number of people, so motions automatically fail.
Okay, do we have any other amendments or requests? Or should we move to the motion?
Yeah, so the motion's still hanging out there.
The motion-
Yeah, sorry, amendment, but I meant motions in general. That was just on the amendment. The motion, which I'll read again, just to make sure everybody is clear where we're at. Amend to increase the project amount with the understanding that all DOT and PF funding within the AMATS area is not impacted, and the project team will look at a lesser footprint without compromising the non-motorized improvements and ensure safety improvements and non-motorized improvements are moved forward quicker. This reduction should be looked at through the entire corridor. This footprint reduction, I apologize.
Okay, so that's what's on before as the motion as it now stands to go to the policy committee. Do we have any requested amendments? Are we ready to vote on the motion?
Question on the reduction in footprint. Reduction from what?
4-lane section,
from the preferred.
I think from the presented alternative.
Well, because nothing, I mean, again, this is part of the problem. Reduction from what? we don't have a recommendation and an EA as far as what they're even proposing.
So
We have
can
a
I,
presentation. We have a presentation from yesterday on something that hasn't been completely baked yet.
Okay, that's thank you, Brian, for your comment. Did you have something, Elisa?
can I propose an amendment
Yep.
that might speak to that? To Brian's concerns and still retain some of the language. Can we amend the motion to suggest that the project team consider a smaller footprint?
Yeah.
And suggest that they, in considering the smaller footprint, they also attempt to retain the non-motorized. No, I take that back. Just that single amendment to consider a smaller
I'd say
footprint.
consider, I would agree. The only other thing that I forgot to
Hold on,
mention.
sorry. You're doing an amendment,
Yeah,
so we need that's a movement. We need a second.
Second,
Cute. And it's just a change.
from will to consider. It's just a request that they consider this change rather than direction that they do so.
So how would you see where that word gets changed in there, Aaron?
Yes. Let me just read it really quickly, or second, let me. We'd have to change some generic language. So the amend to increase the project amount with the understanding that all DOT and PF funding within the AMATS area is not impacted, and the project team will consider looking at a lesser footprint. Looking at a lesser footprint without compromising the non-motorized improvements, and ensure safety improvements and non-motorized improvements are moved quicker. The footprint reduction would be looked at throughout the entire corridor.
And so Brian had raised the question of lesser, what's it relative to? I think in our context, they came with the preferred option alternative. Does that need to get incorporated into this statement, or is that something that, as you write this up, can be included? Do you have a suggestion, Aaron? Is that?
I'd recommend you put it in there. Are you talking about less than the 4-lane divided highway that
Yeah.
they provided to you, or lesser than 12 lanes?
lesser than the 4-lane section.
So that would be a amendment. I guess you can do a friendly amendment if everybody's okay with it, but
Are we still?
we have a motion on the table that we need to act on. So the motion changing where it says will consider needs to be voted on.
Okay, are there any objections to incorporating the will consider language into this motion? Okay, hearing none, that motion, that amendment passes. And then, did you want to make the second?
I would like to clarify, instead of a lesser footprint, a lesser footprint than the 4-lane divided highway alternative.
The amendment's been suggested or proposed by Ms. Kohlhaas. We have a second.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Sabab. Are there any objections to that clarification, that amendment being added in as clarification?
I'm going to object. Because once again, we are attempting to drive their NEPA process through what is basically a funding process. They're already going through a NEPA process. They're going through design reviews and so forth like that. If they've got to a 4-lane divided after what feels like 2 years of working on this, and the number of people that have been involved with it, I gotta believe they've got a pretty good reason for it.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Let's just vote on it. Can you do a roll call?
Yep, Taylor, can you read it one more time?
Thank you.
Amend to increase the project amount with the understanding that all DOT and PF funding within the AMATS area is not impacted, and the project team will consider looking at a lesser footprint than the 4-lane divided highway alternative without compromising the non-motorized improvements, and ensure safety improvements and non-motorized improvements are moved forward quicker. The footprint reduction should be looked at through the entire corridor.
And so what we're voting on now is the amendment to add the
Lesser than the
4-lane
Yes.
4-lane divided.
divided. So that's the amendment that we're voting on. So yours is a yes to the amendment? Okay,
Okay, Brian,
No.
Amy Brown,
I'm just gonna continue to abstain.
sounds good. Yemi Alimi,
No.
Steve Rebuffo,
No.
Luke Boland.
No.
Ben White,
No.
Brad Coy,
yes.
Melinda Colhas. The footprint lesser than the 4-lane divided alternative. That's
Yes.
the change.
Yes.
Okay, yes. Bart Rudolph
Yes.
and Melissa.
Yes.
5-5. So it fails. 5-5. So that is not added in.
Okay, so we have the main motion before us. Are we ready to vote on it? I don't hear anyone jumping in with an amendment. We're gonna vote on it now. And we'll do a roll call.
Okay. Taylor Keegan,
Yes.
Brian Lindemood,
No.
Amy Brown,
I'm not exactly sure what we're voting on right now.
the main motion.
Okay, I'm gonna abstain. I was just unclear about what was happening.
Sounds good. Yemi Alimi,
No.
okay. Steve Rebuffo,
No.
okay, Luke Boland, Ben White,
No.
Brad Coy,
Yes.
sorry. Yes. Melinda Colhas,
Yes.
Bart Rudolph,
Yes.
and Melissa.
Yes.
Okay, to no one's surprise, that is 5-5. So it fails.
Okay, so I'll entertain a different motion.
Just as a heads up, we have 10 minutes left of the meeting, so if you'd like to do more, we will need to extend. We
Yes.
do need to get through the second item.
We do. So I'm thinking we're probably at least another half hour extending. Should we just do it in 15-minute increments or just extend half an hour?
Let's do 15.
15. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to extend 15 minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Boland, seconded by Ms. Colhas. The meeting's extended 15 minutes to 3:15 to 10. Okay, motion. Someone have a motion that we can get approved.
Aaron, can you read that one more time, just so I can try and craft something here?
Oh, the last amendment or the last,
What's on there right now? Yeah,
there is no motion.
Oh, we
right
just
now.
voted.
there's no motion.
So the one we just voted down, amend to increase the project amount with the understanding that all DOT and PF funding within the AMATS area is not impacted, and the project team will consider looking at a lesser footprint without compromising the non-motorized improvements and ensure safety improvements and non-motorized improvements are moved forward quicker. The footprint reduction will be looked at through the entire corridor.
Can I move to use that, but instead of saying we'll consider conveys?
Right, just a second. Okay, so we'll use that and then make changes. Okay, what would you like?
Would like to forward input to the project team that. And continues on. So it takes out the will consider, but forward on
Fun.
to the project team. I don't know. Does that still capture kind of what we're trying to go without overlap in the NEPA process or
It's expressing
expressing?
That's-
Expressing might be a better word there. Yeah.
or conveying.
Okay, which comment? So it's amend to increase the project amount with the understanding that all DOT or PF funding within the AMATS area is not impacted. So that seems to be an agreement. And would like to forward to the project team comments as follows. What comments would you like? Is it to look at a lesser footprint without compromising the non-motorized improvements and ensure safety improvements and non-motorized improvements are moved forward quicker?
I think that captures the discussion that we've had here today.
Okay. Okay, I'll read it back just so we all know. Amend to increase the project amount with the understanding that all DOT and PF funding within the AMATS area is not impacted. And would like to forward to the project team comments as follows. We'll look at a lesser footprint without compromising the non-motorized improvements and ensure safety improvements and non-motorized improvements are moved forward quicker. The footprint reduction should be looked at through the entire corridor.
Second.
Okay, moved by Mr. Boland, seconded by Mr. Lindemood. Any discussion, amendments? We've gone through this a few times, so are we good to just vote on it?
Close. It's something about will look. It's like, who will look? Express to the project team.
Project team.
Does it say?
It just says would like to forward to the project team comments as follows. We'll look at a lesser footprint. It doesn't say who will look. It just says will look.
The project team will look at.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
So we
Like,
can do those.
just will look, like, who will?
Seems like a good clarification.
Yeah, I think so.
I don't know if Ryan's okay with that.
Help me understand what changed.
We just added the word the project team will look at the beginning of the comment.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that's fine. So long as the appropriate people who are developing the project get the message and do the work, that's what matters. So there's so many cooks in that kitchen, it's hard to tell me who's on that fry station this week.
Yep. Okay, well, this is the public process in action, trying to figure out how to frame this, but so was that a friendly amendment or was this?
Yes.
Okay.
So the new thing reads, amend to increase the project amount with the understanding that all DOT and PF funding within the AMATS area is not impacted, and would like to forward to the project team comments as follows. The project team will look at a lesser footprint without compromising the non-motorized improvements and ensure safety improvements and non-motorized improvements are moved forward quicker. The footprint reduction should be looked at through the entire corridor.
Okay. We're good with that? We're ready to vote on it? I'm gonna just ask, are there any objections to this well-crafted motion? Okay, hearing no objections, the motion passes. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for working hard on that. And yeah, I guess we now have forwarded that onto the policy committee. The next item on our agenda is action item 5B, the AMATS UPWP amendment.
Okay, this will be me really quickly. So just want to let you all know that we are looking at doing a UPWP amendment. So the UPWP is the work program that funds staff time and a few other things for AMATS. So normally our UPWP is 2 years. So FY24 and FY25 in this case, but we get a year's budget worth of notice from DOT on a yearly basis. We do estimates for the second year. So we are in the second year of our UPWP, which is FY25. We've gotten the actual amount available from Department of Transportation for FY25. And what we're doing now is basically truing up the budget to what we have available based on that information provided from DOT. There's been a change to this formula calculation compared to last year's. What's changed this go around is the obligation limitation has been removed. So in the past, DOT would provide us an amount based on the obligation limitation. So federal funds in the state of Alaska come with obligation limitation. So basically you can't use up to your full amount of money that you have available. It's a budgeting tool that's put into place by the state or the feds. Sorry, it's always confusing who does it, by the feds. And you still have that funding. You just have to find obligation limitation from another place, or if you have a leftover funding or limitation. This go around, DOT has decided to go ahead and make 100% available for AMATS to use. So instead of 90%, we now have 100%, which is a good thing. We have more money available to us. Well, is normally a good thing. We are in kind of a difficult situation right now with AMATS down to one staff member, some assistance from some uni people, and myself. So we saw around a $500,000 increase over the estimated amount that we had for FY25. When staff put this budget together, we were originally anticipating not using all 500,000 of it, but since posting this, we have actually been able to work with different groups to find a home for all of that money. So we are actually going to be making a recommended change to the budget as part of this, but let's go through what we did. So the first is adding some additional funding to Task 120, which is the Transportation Improvement Program. So this is where we spend our time working on the TIP. $100,000 is programmed to provide funding for purchase and development of an e-TIP. So right now we develop our TIP in a Excel format, and then we make it all look pretty and make it all available there. The idea here is to move away from the Excel into an actual program that's specifically designed for MPOs and funding programs like the TIP. So it's all put into there. We can make things geolocated so people can see the projects. We can put pretty pictures in. We can make maps. We can do stats. It makes it a lot easier for the public, makes it a lot easier for the technical committee, the policy committee, and staff to follow along with the TIP and managing the TIP. It's pretty common in the lower 48 for MPOs to have programs. If you're a larger MPO, smaller MPOs don't typically have the resources capable, but we are in a good position right now as our TMA, our medium-sized MPO, to have some funding available to get this started. So staff has actually reached out to a consulting firm to get them to review a variety of e-TIP softwares throughout the country and to provide recommendations for staff to review. We actually have 3 different softwares that we're going to be looking at. I can't tell you the names right now, but just note that we're really excited about being able to look at them and move into this kind of new direction. So the idea here is to get this started, get an e-TIP online, get it developed in time for the 27 through 2030 TIP cycle. So it's our next go around. A couple things that we'll be looking at is compatibility with other programs. The state may eventually move back into their e-STIP software away from the Airtables, and we want to make sure that whatever we use is compatible with whatever they use. So far, we've been able to find that there are a couple out there that are compatible regardless of what anybody uses. Another thing we're looking at is what can the other MPOs in the state of Alaska do? Because we'd like to all be on the same software, even if we do things a little differently, but is it something that can be affordable for the MVP and FAST, because they do have a little bit more of a budget constraint on this type of item. So very excited to move forward on that. We just need the money to get it going, to get the software purchased.
Is that funding, you're pretty confident that's going to fully cover with a little bit of buffer? Or?
Yeah, that's a little bit of buffer to pay for help with the consultants to get things to actually develop it, because it comes as a package, but we'll need tweaks and everything like that. So we're anticipating this will cover the licensing fee and any additional work that needs to be done. So I will let you know that the intent is to try and get it done within this fiscal year. However, things take a long time. And so while you see this 100,000 in here, we may actually need to show it again in the next UPWP that we develop for 26 and 27. And that's just to continue the ongoing effort. So you may see this again. Next item, task 290, is for the congestion management status of the system. 50,000 is programmed to provide additional support for the CMP update. During our certification review, it was flagged by FHWA that we need to update our congestion management process plan that we have. It is getting fairly old. It is from 2016, no, somewhere around, I think earlier, 2014 or so, I think. So it is 10 years old at this point, and that is a little dated. We did get help from the Department of Transportation to help meet our corrective action on this item and get a kind of general review of the CMP and things we need to look at for the next update. This is funding consultant help to manage a CMP update. So AMATS has no more capacity for additional plans, but they keep coming. And we have to keep these things moving on, especially as this is a federally required one. So the idea here is to get a term contract with a consultant, have them manage the CMP update. The CMP update itself is funded through the TIP. So this is not to cover the actual work that a consultant will be doing to do the update. It's to pay for the consultant that'll oversee the consultant who will do the work for the update. I understand this is not desired by everybody and is complicated, but as AMATS still has not been able to hire anybody else, we do not have the capacity to manage this on our own.
Do we have the funding for the plan? And this is,
Yes,
so this is just extra because of this.
this is just for the consultant to manage the consultant who's updating the plan. Super confusing, I know. Task 532, public involvement and outreach. We're going to be adding 38,000 as program for the public input license renewal. This is our engagement tool that we have. We want to make sure we have enough money for that license renewal. What's missing here, and I forgot to add, is we're also going to be looking at doing some additional video development for like an AMATS 101 or other type of things like that. Get something developed that is there for the public, the committees, to have a better understanding of what we do and follow along a little easier and do in a way that's understandable. So we don't have to use jargon all the time. So those were the original edits. Staff would actually like to make a couple more changes. Do you want me to talk about those now, or would you like me to wait until after a motion has been made?
Might make sense just to get it out there now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Staff's going to be recommending to add actually another 50,000 to the task 290. We may need some more money than 50,000 for consultant services. Things are very expensive these days. And when I originally looked at the 50,000, I was like, oh yeah, this will be fine. And then realized, oh no, we're going to need a lot more help than that. And it was recommended after having discussion with some other people at the Muni, we may need a little more money in this item. So we're recommending bumping that from 50 to 100,000. And then the rest of the funding, which is about 262,000, we're recommending putting it into task 410, traffic and transportation data support. Basically, this is us working with the traffic department in getting traffic counts or other things throughout our community. We're going to put some more funding in there to see if we can work with traffic to do some traffic counts on a variety of roads before projects go in, so we can get a good understanding of what the current need is for active transportation users, road car users, transit users, all that kind of stuff. So we need some more money added to that particular task.
How much was going to be added to?
$262,000. So that would fully program all $500,000 that we have received in addition to FY25. I will let you know if we are not able to fully use the funding from FY25 because of staff shortages or other things. What happens is all the remaining funding goes back to the state and is put into the pot of money for MPO planning. We have been working very closely with the state, and the state has been very collaborative in this, that if there is funding available and there is a need from an MPO, they can request that funding. Then all the MPOs get together with the state and say, what's your request? Why do you need it? Yay or nay? So this is not funding that'll go back to the state for them to do whatever they want with. This is really geared towards staying with the MPOs and helping to assist us when needs come up. A good example, Matsu Valley Planning, MVP, just got stood up as an MPO. They needed some additional funding for their MTP work and other work. And so they put a request in to say, hey, can we have some additional money out of this pot? There was some additional money available, and the MPOs came together and said, go ahead, you got a lot of work to get done. So we will keep an eye on that and see how it goes.
Okay, any questions or comments from the committee?
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead, Melissa.
I know DOT and MOA have been interested in updating our cooperative agreement. I don't know if there's any assistance from this funding pot that could go towards that.
We are not involved in that cooperative agreement.
Other questions or comments? From the committee? Okay, are there any comments from the public? Do you see anybody online? See anyone right now? Okay, no comments from the public. So what is the will of the committee?
I move to recommend to the policy committee the proposed funding identified in the staff report with the amendment, with the increases for the task 290 and the added recent task
410.
410.
410, yep.
I'll second.
Moved by Ms. Kohlhaas, seconded by Mr. Rebuffo. Are there any discussion or amendments? Okay, hearing none. Are there any objections to approving the motion? Or something? What?
Just a comment, you said a couple of tasks within more tasks.
Oh, yes. The full report.
No, she
with
said the memo
inclusion of the
and the additional things that we talked about.
Okay, any objections to approving the motion? Okay, hearing none, the motion is approved. So the last few items that we have on our agenda, we've got 7 minutes left, unless we decided we want to extend our AMATS safety campaign update and glossary for AMATS. Those things you want to address real quick and can in that time frame?
Yes, I can do real quick on the safety campaign, and then so I just want to let people know we have a AMATS safety campaign that's been doing a lot of work, working with the traffic department at the Muni, and the Muni has been working with the Center for Safe Alaskans. We're going to be putting together like a little report on how things are going there in conjunction with what's going on for the municipality of Anchorage and all their work. And we're going to try and bring this back at a later point so you can have some information. Basically, we're just wanting to report and let you know what the money you've got, you and the policy committee have allocated towards specific projects, what's been happening, because a lot of outreach and effort has been done and a lot of really good hard work. We also wanted to give you a heads up. There's probably going to be a funding request increase for this program as part of TIP Amendment number 3. There is a need for some additional funding to do more outreach efforts and some other items that we'll talk about at a later date. So we're out of time. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Okay. And that coincides with the Vision Zero action plan as well. It's listed as one of the action items in that plan, actually, was to reconsider funding level to be able to do more because there's been requests. So thank you for that. Is there anything else to say about 6B, the glossary for AMATS?
Yes, we're going to do a quick thing. If you would like to divert your attention, Christine will do this one.
Real quick, so as you know, a couple years ago, we started public input. We're trying to consolidate AMATS processes for the public so you know what to expect. And our public participation plan update will be coming very soon. So on the same veins of those lines, we've developed a glossary of terms so that every planning process can start from the same place, using the same definitions, and it can live on our website, easily navigatable by by the alphabet. But 3 things I'd like to point out for that is what we would like to do. We've talked a little bit about we're required to try to plan using plain language. And I know in one of our recent policy committee meetings, one of the policy members said we really need to get away from using acronyms and not everybody understands. So AMATS has 3 very typical acronyms, and if anybody that didn't understand, listen to our conversation with 5A on STIP, said that back and forth lots of times. So we would like to propose that the MTP is just called the transportation plan. AMATS says this is AMATS's plan. So when we're referring to it, we can call it the AMATS transportation plan. In our definition of it, it will still refer to, it's known in the federal process as the MTP for everybody who's already that terminology. The TIP, we are proposing that we just call it the funding program. That is AMATS's funding program. And again, in the definition, we can say that in the federal process, it's known as the TIP. And then the last one, which we just talked to the UPWP, that is also the second program of AMATS, but it is a work plan. It says work plan, so it's an error on my part. It should say work program. But those are the 3 acronyms that we use typically, and if we can get them in everybody's vocabulary in that way when we're discussing them, I think can help to clear up some information when people are listening to our meetings and if they're watching the recordings. But this is a living document. We can add and subtract to it. We can amend it as you wish. Those are just kind of, we wanted to get it out there, looking at some of the plans and the different glossaries that we put at the beginning of every single plan. And here's would be the starting point as a move.
Okay, thanks, Christine. Before we ask any questions, we have a minute left on our clock. We want to extend at all. I was hoping to show the Vision Zero video, which is about a 5-minute. But I understand if no one wants to extend a couple minutes, wrap up in 1 minute, or we could extend. My request would be 10 minutes if everyone's okay with that. But I'm just entertaining the motion if someone wants to make a motion. Or if we're good finishing up right now.
I have another meeting to go to.
Okay. Okay, sounds good. So we'll move on then. Thank you so much.
Will you email the video to us?
Yes, I can
Great.
throw the video out.
Perfect.
So we are about pretty much to end. Thank you everyone for coming. We have 15 seconds, so we're not going to try to do the committee comments, public comments at this point. Because of that, thank you for staying after to get through all these items. And with that, I'll that's a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn. Second.
Okay, move to the seconded. All approved? Any objections? Okay, hearing none, we are adjourned at 3:15.
Well,